All right, welcome back. Sorry about the connection there. If you were watching earlier, we were having a conversation with Aerostar via Zoom, and unfortunately, that's the joys of live television. You never really know how things will work out, and unfortunately, her connection couldn't hold until the end of the interview. But we're going to try and get her some other time right here on Rubbing Minds. So we're very sorry about that. But we're going to move on now and shift our conversation to mental health. The 10th of October was World Mental Health Day, and it's a cause that is starting to gain some traction here in Nigeria. Something that was heavily stigmatized in the past is starting to, you know, get some understanding from Nigerians as to how important it is and why we should take it more seriously. I have here with me Tolusha Francis, who's a mental health coach and advocate. Thanks a lot for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So am I right in what I just said? Are you seeing a shift in how Nigerians talk about or deal with or, you know, have the conversations around mental health?
Yes, there is a shift. It's not like we're there yet, but like you said some years back, even having this kind of conversation on TV would be seen like, who is going to listen? I mean, there are other things to discuss while you're discussing mental health. But I mean, that is changing from TV to radio to social media, on the bus, on the street. You know, people are getting to talk about mental health. The real question will be, is it that people are studying more or people are just interested in having a conversation? But then as much as it's getting traction and as much as people are talking about it, you also have this situation where people tend to use it as an excuse, right, when they misbehave or when they mess up. And so it begins to call to question those who are really struggling with one form of mental health condition or the other, and those who just want to use it as a rider to misbehave or to do something wrong. Well, yes, we can't say that the conversations are happening, the talking points are there, but we can do better.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, you know, there's a lot of people who have always said the hardest thing about this is how to approach, you know, the conversation with someone who's dealing with this. First of all, it's so hard in many cases to even know that something is wrong because the spectrum is so wide. There are some that you can visibly or sort of see or, you know, understand. But on so many levels, you know, depression, it's a very wide spectrum of, you know, mental health issues. And I think one of the biggest talking points is how do we even spot this? How do we have these conversations? So it makes it very, very hard to understand what actually is mental health, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so I quite agree with you because you're careful not to touch a spot that throws the person off guard. You're careful not to say something and the person doesn't trust you anymore. But then how do you hold this conversation with anybody? Just hold this conversation like you hold every other normal civil conversation. How are you? How are you has become, the response to how are you has become a cliche, like I am fine. Or the religious undertone of someone isn't feeling well and then they say I'm strong. Right, you're not feeling fine. Come on, tell us you're not feeling fine, right? Don't tell us it's true. But then, just asking how are you and being empathetic when you're saying, like, look, I really mean how are you? I think the other challenge a lot of times is, even when we want to have these conversations, what's the mindset that we have? Are we trying to be the savior when we're asking these questions about how are you, how you feeling, how was your night? Or are we just trying to get information that we then use to do other things, right? So the same way you'd have a conversation with someone who is unhappy, right, and is able to tell you something is bothering me. So don't make it difficult. Don't make it tough. How are you? Is there something you'd love to discuss? The issue here is trust, actually. So even if you ask someone, the question that comes to their heads is, if I tell you, hope you will not use whatever I tell you as a motivational speech, you know, and so you begin to have that challenge. But I mean, over time, you can begin by saying, look, I'm asking because I care, right? I'm not asking because I want to gather information. I'm asking because I care. What would you have me do? I'm not coming here as the savior. I'm not coming here as the chief commanding officer. But I'm asking because I want you to know that I'm there for you. I want you to know that you can talk to me. Each person, every person has one thing or the other. But hey, I'm here for you. Here is a shoulder for you to lean on.
Yeah. So you talked earlier, you know, about, you know, how Nigerians are probably starting to, you know, be a little more understanding of these courses. But, you know, it's something that many people still find hard to understand why certain things are. You know, you hear someone say, I have anxiety. people automatically link it to being anxious. And when you're anxious, are you really sick? You know, people don't understand how to link things like that. People say link depression as being sad for just a moment, you know. You know, so these are things that are still very hard for people to understand why that is a thing. And there's people who say, oh, but back in our day, these things were not an issue. You people are so weak these days. So are these things that are new with regards to mental health in Nigeria, especially, or have they always been there, but we just never really knew what to call them?
Well, they've always been there. I mean, if you want to know if something has always been there, so ask yourself, how long has there been a specialty like psychology, a specialty like psychiatry, a specialty like neuroscience? Right, it didn't happen. These specialties didn't come in the 2000s and all that. I mean, I remember the first Nigerian, for example, who served at the World Federation for Mental Health was Samano Manua, who years back, in fact, I'm not even sure that my own parents were even married as at that time, you know. And so that said that it's always been there. But the thing is, you know, because of the way our grandparents, great-grandparents were living, there was a tendency to tie it to one God somewhere that had offended, who had done something, or seeking local remedies to say, no, something is wrong and all that. And so these conversations were not held mainstream, right? So it just, something has happened to this person, you know, and all that. So it's always been there. It's not new. It's the awareness, right, that is coming up, that is making us pay attention and thinking that these things are new. Depression has always been there. Anxiety has always been there. Panic attacks have always been there. Schizophrenia have always been there. I mean, it's to ask yourself, this is not the first time that you would see someone on the street, you know, and this person has a mental health condition, right? It's always been there. Different languages give that particular thing different names, right? So it's not new. But then I think they were able to tie it to one thing or the other, maybe religionize it, if there's any word like that. But here we are in this modern world, modern generation, even though, I mean, it's still unequal. We're bringing that awareness. These things have names. And say, look, these things have names, even though they don't define the persons, but these things have names. Let's talk about them. Let's not throw them under the carpet and assume that it's not happening, right? Let's also pay attention to the growth or how you move from one stage to the other. So the conversations are happening. Social media is helping. Technology is enhancing the conversation. And so even across the ocean, across cities, you're having conversations around mental health. The awakening is coming. The education is coming, right? Taking it even to the grassroots level. So it's not new. It's just that now we are taking up the conversation. We're talking about it. And so people are getting to hear and to know about it.
Lagos and Nigeria as a whole has a lot of its problems, you know, and there are people who say they suffer from PTSD because of the issues around. Are these things real, based on your experience? Is it possible for you to have, you know, mental health issues because of where you live or how you've grown up in a society?
Oh, definitely. The environment, the culture, the family, the school, religious beliefs, name it, they all have a role to play in the mental health of an individual. And this is how you look at it. Everything that you interact with plays a role in your mind. Your mind is the center of everything. How you think, who you think you are, what you think of yourself, right? And so what you take in, whether externally, by touch or by smell or something, plays a role in your perspective and in your psychological framework. So if I live in a place that is toxic, right, first of all, I will struggle not to be toxic like them. But after a while, I might likely blend in. Now, if I move away from such a toxic environment to a calm area, I will struggle to blend with the peaceful area because I've grown up in a toxic environment. So toxicity becomes like a norm
for you, yes,
for that person, right? It's the same thing. So several times I travel out of Lagos and I go to maybe a place like Abuja. Lagos, you wake up 6 a.m., 5 a.m.,
By the second day, you're bored.
And, you know, and it's 8 a.m. and I stroll out to buy some. I mean, people are just, I'm like, what's this? I remember when I went for youth service in Abeokuta and I woke up like 7 a.m. I wanted to buy something, hoping I would see one malam to buy something from. You know, and my roommate laughed. I was like, okay, you think this is Lagos? You know? Now, for me, I've been used to a particular lifestyle, right? And then I got there, it took me a while to blend. Now, for some people, the coping mechanism that they have may not help them stay that long, and then they give in. And that's why you find out that when people move from one place to the other, which was what another challenge that COVID-19 pandemic brought to us, that confinement, right? You're used to jumping from one place to the other, you're bubbling, and then there's that confinement. Your mind struggles, right? And then so everything you do, what you what you eat, where you stay, the things you do play a role. The moment your coping mechanism fails, then you go down. You go down.
We'll come to COVID as well, but I want to say, I mean, as a mental health coach here in Nigeria, what cases are most prevalent? Do you get, when you interact with people who are, who have these issues or mental health challenges or whatever it is? Are there particular sort of issues that you find that are more prevalent than the other here?
So, I mean, let me say that for a place, I mean, like Nigeria, you have a lot of people dealing with PTSD. You have a lot of people who are also on that depression table. And then you have that of panic attacks and anxiety as well. Of course, because of the level at which I work, some other ones are more of the medical diagnosis, like the schizophrenia, and the likes. But then you also find some of bipolar. And you see, the reason is not far-fetched, right? We're in a fast-moving world. The finances of people are not tangible anymore. Take 1,000 naira to the market. The moment it splits, before you say jack, that money is gone. Yeah. So the present value of money is very low, okay? And people are struggling to make it. So thinking about the next expense that you have is enough, right, to throw you off balance. And then you also have people not being happy with the kind of work they're doing. They have goals, they had aspirations. They had thought that after school, I'll do this, I'll do that. But yet they are even doing jobs that they never thought they would do. So a whole lot of things that the youth, are actually struggling with. That satisfaction from their career isn't there. Yeah. The finances are in there. You are trying to make ends meet. Yet you're even scared of your own life. You're scared that you return home. Insecurity. You're scared that you will make it back home, right? So I mean, you see a lot of these amongst the youth. And they wake up every day and they're like hopeful that, well, let's hope today will be different. Let's hope today will be different. But then something happens and, that supports. So I see it in the way that you've been trying to hold yourself, right? But then, so let's say I'm holding a rod, this walk stick that it was. So I'm holding it and, it's giving me that support to walk, right? I'm like, okay, even though my legs are not so straight, at least with this stick, I can still. And then someone comes and just kicks the stick off my hands. The tendency is that I would fall, right? So they've been there, managing and managing and managing, and then something happens and then off they go. So you find that prevalent a lot amongst the youth who are, still trying to manage themselves, hold themselves, and then events that they didn't plan would happen. The policy changes, businesses are affected, crisis here and there, and they're like, no, what's this? Where do I even begin from? Hopes are dashed, So if discussing with youth and interacting, they realize that look, a whole lot of youth are really struggling to keep their heads above the water, right? Because I mean, either they grew up with a silver spoon or not, it doesn't matter. The rich and the poor are thrown into the same economy, right? It's a function of what is available for you to use at that point in time.
Yeah. You mentioned COVID there very quickly. I find that people say two different things about how the lockdown affected them. There are people who say they came out better because they were able to introspect and all of that and came out probably mentally healthier. There are a lot of people, like you've mentioned as well, who could not cope in that sort of confinement and, went into this. What do you find that something like that does? And is it possible if you have like mental issues that could be a savior? Because we're still in it. Okay. And, some countries still go in and out of lockdowns. Do things like that help or sort of aggravate, you think?
So when you look at things like confinement, things like lockdown, it's not straitjacketed. Yeah. The impact, the effect, so to speak, it's a human-to-human thing. Right? For some people, yes, it was an opportunity for them to make more money. It brought business ideas. They discovered the gifts or the talents they didn't know that they had. For some, it was an abnormal thing for them. For some, their businesses were tied to them moving here and there, and they couldn't, right? And that was an issue for them, right? For some people, the fact that you had to leave, do everything within the same spot was an issue. So if you look at it, every individual, just like you throw everyone into the same system, every individual would cope differently, right? And I think what the lockdown did was a check as to how really were people faring when everything was normal, right? It revealed and exposed a whole lot of the inadequacies of the human nature, right? For some, they had it going well for them. Some, their own issues started after the lockdown. For some, it was during lockdown. For some, it was after the lockdown, right? Yeah. So when you look at it, you see that it's a function of the human person. One, either the kind of support they had during that period, For some, it was a function of what we're able to do in that period. I mean, I had my own challenges that period, you know, and even post the period. But some people will tell you that, man, that was the best moment of my life. Why did the lockdown even end? You know, so individually, everyone, you know, picked something from COVID, whether positively or negatively.
Very quickly now, before we go, what I know there's no one size fits all, you know, but what does the average Nigerian need to do to stay mentally healthy? What are some of the things we need to do?
First of all, I tell people that we're social beings. We're not made or fashioned to isolate ourselves, right? So as much as possible, you need people who would speak your language, people who genuinely care, people who would really empathize and not pity you. Another thing is you need to pay attention to what you think of yourself and of the situation. Because what you think of yourself or the situation would pass on to becoming a feeling, right? And the moment that feeling sets in, you behave in that way. So I say this is called problem thinking, problem feeling, problem behavior, right? So what do you think about yourself? And so what do you take in? I mean, social media is lovely. Tech is interesting and fantastic, but these things also have their own effect, and also you need to realize and know when you're beginning to have too much and it's beginning to distort your pattern and your way of life. Sleep is very important. Sleep well, eat well. Trust me, you don't trade your sleep for anything as much as possible.
What if you can't sleep? I can't sleep. I try.
Yeah, you know, and the truth is, if you cannot sleep and you realize that it's a regular, then you should seek help. It's not a norm.
Yeah,
the body is wired in a way that at certain times begins to shut down. When your body is not shutting down, overworking, after a while, right, things will start giving up. Even your thinking faculty will start giving up. You find it difficult to concentrate. Your productivity will drop. Right, and I mean, the next thing you're wondering why you underperforming. Yeah. So sleep well, eat well, relate with people who really care about you. Pay attention to your use of tools, social media, and every other thing, and as much as possible, have fun.
Thank you very much, and seek help.
Oh yeah, oh no, definitely. I mean,
if you
I let them because
like,
I felt it was a number. Hey, seek help. I mean, don't even wait until you can't hold it anymore. The moment you're beginning to notice those things, you're just suddenly unhappy. Don't wait until it's 2 weeks and all that. 2-3 days you're unhappy, reach out for help.
Thank you very much, Tulisha Francis, for this. It's not something that we can talk enough about.
Definitely.
But hopefully the conversation is starting to happen, and we want to believe that Nigerians will start taking it as seriously as it should be taken. Thanks a lot for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot for joining us. Like I always say, you can follow the conversation on social media. Please use the hashtag #RubbingMinds when you tweet at us. I'll see you next Sunday.